The woman collapsed right there on the sidewalk, gasping for air while a crowd froze with their phones out. I dropped my lunch bag, knelt down, and pressed my hands against her chest, counting compressions with every ounce of strength I had. When she finally coughed and pulled in a shaky breath, the sirens were still blocks away, yet her first words weren't what anyone expected. "My name's Daniel Carter, and for most folks in this town, I'm just the guy who fixes their transmissions and changes their oil." Truth is, that's been my world for the past decade. Raising my daughter, keeping food on the table, and stretching every dollar till it nearly tears. I don't complain much. Life hasn't been easy, but it's been ours. That Tuesday started like every other. I packed 2 lunch bags, one for me, one for my 11-year-old daughter, Lily. Hers always got the better stuff, the last of the good fruit, an extra sandwich if we had the bread for it. I dropped her at school, kissed her on the forehead, and headed to the shop. By mid-afternoon, I was on a parts run downtown, just another errand in a long string of them. I might have driven right past if it weren't for the crowd. Dozens of people clustered on the sidewalk, phones out, whispering. My first thought was some street performer had drawn attention, but when I pulled over, I saw her. A woman in a business suit sprawled on the concrete, clutching her chest, her skin the color of wet cement. Everyone stood back, staring like it was a movie. Nobody moved. Something inside me clicked. I didn't think. I didn't weigh the risks. I just grabbed my old work jacket, dropped my lunch bag, and pushed through the circle of onlookers. I could hear her breathing, shallow, uneven, every gasp weaker than the last. One look at her gray face told me what was happening. Heart attack. I'd only finished 1 year of pre-med before life knocked me off course, but some things you don't forget. CPR training stays burned into your brain. I dropped to my knees, positioned my hands on her sternum, and started compressions. 1, 2, 3. The rhythm took over. My palms pressed hard and steady, counting out loud the way they taught us. Sweat dripped down my neck as I pushed her chest down again and again, feeling the fragile line between life and death under my hands. Around me, people whispered, recorded, prayed. None of it mattered. All I saw was her face slowly losing its fight. 28, 29, 30. I leaned in, ready, when she coughed, a ragged, wet sound. Then she dragged in a breath, shaky but real. Her color shifted from ashen gray to something closer to flesh. Relief washed over me, but I kept my hands steady, monitoring her pulse until the wail of sirens cut through the noise. Paramedics swarmed in, pushing me aside gently, slipping tubes and wires into place. I stood back, chest heaving, watching them take over. For them, this was routine. For me, it felt like the longest 2 minutes of my life. When they loaded her into the ambulance, I wiped my hands on my greasy jacket, grabbed my abandoned lunch bag, and turned to leave. A couple of people stopped me, asking who I was, if I was a doctor. I just shook my head. "Mechanic," I said, and walked back to my truck. By the time I pulled back into Martinez Auto Repair, it was like nothing had happened. Just another parts delivery, another day. But the weight in my chest told me otherwise. What I didn't know, what none of those bystanders knew, was that the woman whose life I'd just pulled back from the edge wasn't just some stranger in a suit. Her name was Veronica Hayes, and she was one of the wealthiest, most powerful businesswomen in the state. At that moment, she was just the woman I'd kept alive. And me? I was just a grease-stained single dad who hadn't realized that one decision, one reflex to step forward while everyone else froze, was about to turn my whole life upside down. I didn't tell Lily much that night. After dinner, when she looked at me with those sharp eyes of hers and asked if something had happened at work, I just said, "I helped someone who was sick." No need to burden an 11-year-old with the details of chest compressions and a stranger gasping for air. She nodded, but then she hit me with the question that caught me off guard. "Dad, do you ever miss being a doctor?" I froze with a plate in my hands. I'd never told her much about my short time in medical school. She was only 2 when I walked away from that life after her mom passed. I set the plate down, cleared my throat, and said, "I was never a doctor, sweetheart. Just a student for a little while. But yeah, sometimes I wonder." That night, after she went to bed, I found myself on the old laptop, looking up CPR techniques and cardiac arrest survival rates. I needed to know if I'd done it right, if what I remembered from all those years ago had actually mattered. Turns out it had. Every article said the same thing. Without immediate compressions, survival chances plummet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, realizing that if I hadn't stopped, that woman, whoever she was, probably wouldn't be alive. While I was digging through medical journals in our cramped apartment, Veronica Hayes was lying in a hospital bed at St. Mary's. I didn't know it then, but she'd woken up surrounded by machines, wires, and a cardiologist telling her she'd had a major heart attack. And the first words out of her mouth weren't about her health or her family. They were, "Call my lawyer." That's who she was. A woman used to making decisions with the snap of her fingers, running corporations that moved millions like chess pieces. But from what I later learned, she wasn't calling him about money or contracts. She wanted to change her will. Her doctor told her I'd saved her life, gave her my name, told her if I hadn't stepped in, she wouldn't have made it to the ambulance. She listened, nodded, and instead of resting, she picked up the phone and called her attorney, demanding he meet her at the hospital. While she was dictating legal changes in a gown with wires stuck to her chest, I was washing dishes in a cramped kitchen, wondering if maybe, just maybe, I'd let my dream go too soon. Two different worlds. One billionaire lying in a hospital suite, deciding what legacy meant. One grease-stained single dad in a two-bedroom apartment, thinking about the road not taken. Neither of us knew it yet, but those worlds were about to collide head-on. By Friday, I'd mostly convinced myself that what happened downtown was already behind me. The woman lived, the paramedics did their job, and I went back to fixing cars. Simple as that. Then Saturday morning, a courier showed up at my door. Not the mailman, not UPS, an actual guy in a suit carrying a leather folder. He handed me an envelope thick with expensive stationery, the kind you see in law shows on TV, and asked me to sign for it. Inside was a handwritten note, elegant and formal, inviting me to a private meeting at the Hayes estate. A matter of mutual interest, it said. My stomach turned. I didn't need to Google her name to know she was somebody important, but seeing it written out in blue ink made me realize just how out of my league she was. By the time Saturday afternoon rolled around, I was second-guessing myself. I shaved twice, put on the only decent shirt I owned, and still felt like I looked out of place. Lily wanted to come, but I told her it wasn't that kind of visit. I promised her we'd grab ice cream after, no matter what. The estate sat behind tall iron gates, the kind that whisper, "You don't belong here." Driving in, I passed fountains, gardens clipped so perfectly they looked fake, and a house so big it made our apartment feel like a broom closet. My boots clicked on polished stone as I followed a staff member through hallways lined with art I'd only ever seen in catalogs. Then, to my surprise, Veronica Hayes herself met me at the door to her study. No assistant, no guard. Just her, looking far healthier than the last time I saw her, though still a little pale. She smiled faintly, motioned me inside, and closed the door behind us. The study looked like something out of a movie. Leather chairs, walls stacked with books, tall windows spilling sunlight over a view of endless gardens. She sat across from me, leaning forward as if this was supposed to be a conversation between equals. "You're the first person who ever saved my life without asking who I was," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that probably closed million-dollar deals. I've been thinking about that every day since. I shifted in my chair, uncomfortable with the weight of her words. "I just did what anyone would have done," I muttered. "You were in trouble. I knew CPR. That's all there was to it." She shook her head. "No, Mr. Carter. Most people didn't move. They froze. You didn't. That makes you different." For the next 2 hours, we talked. Or rather, she asked questions and listened while I stumbled through answers. She wanted to know about Lily, about how I dropped out of pre-med when my wife passed away, about the years spent turning wrenches instead of cracking textbooks. I told her more than I planned to, maybe because she wasn't judging, just listening. Finally, she leaned back and folded her hands. "I don't give out cash rewards," she said. "Money doesn't solve everything. But I can remove barriers. I can open doors you thought were closed forever. Daniel, I'd like to give you a chance to finish what you started." I frowned. "Finish what I started?" "Medical school," she said simply. "I'll cover tuition, living expenses, childcare for Lily, whatever you need. Not as charity, but as an investment in someone who proved he has both skill and heart. Think of it as a scholarship, one designed just for you." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. I thought about Lily, about the promise I'd made to myself years ago that her stability came first, no matter what. And here was this woman, offering me the one thing I thought I'd buried forever, a second chance. I cleared my throat, my voice rough. I, I don't know what to say. She smiled. Say you'll think about it. And that's exactly what I promised her as I walked back through that grand house, past the marble floors and priceless paintings, feeling more out of place than ever. But beneath the nerves, a spark I hadn't felt in years flickered back to life. I didn't give her an answer that day. I couldn't. Walking out of that estate, I felt like I'd just been handed a key to a door I thought had rusted shut years ago. But taking it meant rearranging my entire life, and Lily's too. That night, I sat her down at the kitchen table. The old overhead light buzzed, throwing a yellow glow across her notebooks and crayons. She was working on a science project, but when she saw the look on my face, she put her pencil down. What's wrong, Dad? Nothing's wrong, I said slowly. Something happened, and I need your thoughts on it. You know how I always wanted to be a doctor? Her eyes lit up. Wait, you mean, before Mom? Yeah, I nodded. Before everything changed. Well, the woman I helped, her name's Veronica Hayes. She wants to help me go back. School, books, even help with you while I study. She's offering me a shot at finishing what I started. For a second, she just stared at me, like she was trying to picture me in a white coat instead of oil-stained coveralls. Then she broke into the biggest grin I'd seen in years. She threw her arms around me and said, Dad, you'd be the best doctor ever. That one sentence knocked the wind out of me. All the doubts I'd been carrying, the bills, the late nights, the fear of failing, suddenly felt smaller. If my daughter believed I could do it, maybe I could. Within a month, I was enrolled in an accelerated refresher program. Evenings after work were no longer for TV or odd jobs. They were for chemistry flashcards and anatomy notes. Saturdays became study marathons, with Lily sitting beside me, doing her homework while I memorized medical terms I hadn't thought about in a decade. It wasn't easy. Some nights I came home bone-tired from the shop, hands aching from turning wrenches, and the last thing I wanted to do was crack open a textbook. But then I'd look at Lily, curled up with her school books, fighting the same battle in her own way. We pushed through together. Veronica didn't just write checks and disappear. She showed up. Sometimes it was little things, a note of encouragement, a textbook I didn't know I needed, even sitting in the back of a classroom when I gave my first practice presentation. Other times, it was her just listening, reminding me why this mattered. She never made it feel like charity. She made it feel like she believed in me, and that was harder to swallow than the money. 6 months in, she hosted a press conference to announce a scholarship initiative. I didn't want to be the poster boy, but she insisted my story mattered, that people needed to see that second chances were worth investing in. So I stood there in a borrowed suit, cameras flashing, sweating through my collar while she spoke about me like I was some symbol. I wasn't a symbol. I was just a single dad trying to keep his head above water. But as I glanced at Lily in the front row, eyes shining with pride, I realized maybe I was something more. To her, I was proof that it wasn't too late to chase the life you were meant to live. The press conference stirred up more attention than I ever wanted. For a couple of weeks, strangers came into the shop pretending they needed break work, only to ask if I was that single dad who saved the billionaire. I hated the spotlight, but Veronica reminded me the story wasn't just about me. It was about what second chances could mean for people who'd had to put their dreams on hold. At home, life carried on. Lily was the one who kept it real. She didn't care about cameras or headlines. She cared about whether I'd help her practice spelling words or fix the wobbly leg on her desk. One evening, she asked me something that stopped me cold. Dad, is Veronica like family now? I looked at her, not sure what to say. Kids don't bother with labels like benefactor or mentor. To them, people either belong or they don't. Finally, I said, she's someone who cares about us, Lily. Someone who wants to see us do well. That counts for a lot. And truth be told, Veronica had slipped into our lives in ways I never expected. She started helping Lily with her math homework, stuff I'd long forgotten how to explain. Some nights she'd join us for dinner, trading stories about her cutthroat business world while Lily taught her silly card games. Slowly, the gap between billionaire and mechanic shrank until she was just Veronica, sitting at our chipped kitchen table with a glass of lemonade. She also gave me perspective I didn't know I needed. Watching her, I realized how much she'd missed by chasing only numbers and deals. She admitted once that she envied the way Lily leaned on me, the way I showed up for my daughter no matter what. She told me she had the money, the houses, the power, but not this. Not the ordinary life that seemed so small to me, but was priceless to her. For me, the real change wasn't in the headlines or scholarship paperwork. It was in the moments after class when I'd catch Veronica sitting quietly at the back, watching me explain CPR techniques to first-year students. Or when I'd come home and find Lily proudly telling her about my old stories, like how I once built her a dollhouse from scrap wood. Those were the moments when it felt like we were building something none of us had planned for, a kind of family stitched together by circumstance, gratitude, and choice. One night, over takeout pizza, Veronica said something that stuck with me. "Daniel, you think I gave you back your dream. But what you've given me is something I can't buy. Time with people who make life feel real." I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded, passed her another slice, and listened to Lily explain her latest science project. Sometimes the simplest nights carry the most weight. A year slipped by faster than I could have imagined. Between the shop, classes, and Lily's growing list of school projects, I barely had time to catch my breath. Yet every day felt like I was moving forward instead of standing still. By then, I was teaching CPR techniques to first-year med students while still working through my own accelerated program. It felt strange at first. Me, a mechanic in work boots, showing future doctors how to press a stranger's chest and keep the rhythm steady. But once I started, it felt natural, like I was finally using the part of myself I'd buried years ago. Sometimes, when I looked up from the demonstration dummy, I'd catch sight of Veronica sitting quietly in the back row. No cameras, no assistants, no boardroom presence. Just her, watching with the kind of pride I used to think only parents showed their kids. And every time, it reminded me how far we'd come from that sidewalk downtown. Lily fit into this new world like she was born for it. She'd sit outside the classroom with her backpack, working on her math while I taught, then run in afterward to show me what she finished. More than once, she tugged Veronica by the hand, pulling her into our little circle like she'd always belonged there. One evening, after a long day, Veronica handed me a small leather journal. "I've been carrying this for months," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Inside was a letter she'd written, thanking me, not for saving her life, but for showing her what life could mean. She admitted she'd always chased money and influence, but had never learned what a family dinner felt like until she sat at our wobbly kitchen table. That night, the three of us went to Tony's Pizza, our little tradition by then. Red checkered tablecloths, garlic bread, Lily chattering about her summer plans while Veronica scribbled homework notes in the margins of a math worksheet. We laughed, ate too much, and walked home in the soft glow of streetlights, Lily skipping between us like it was the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment, I realized something. Veronica hadn't just given me a scholarship. She hadn't just opened the door back to medicine. She'd given me, and Lily, something far bigger. A reminder that wealth isn't in numbers or estates. It's in the people who show up, who care, who choose to be there when they don't have to be. I thought I was the one being rescued that day, back on the sidewalk. But maybe we all were.